Hello there. Good evening. Right, I'm going to do a short demonstration tonight for you regarding brown fur. I think that's quite a few times from people on the fur techniques involved that I use. So I've got, I'm going to show you in a minute. I'm going to put the camera back down onto my desk so you can see we're working. First of all, I'll show you a reference photograph. Then I'm going to go through the colour pencils that I choose for the brown. I mean, looking at your reference photograph, you should be able to pick out quite a lot of colours. Now, there's several ways of doing that. You can use a computer program, or you could use. I also have a colour picker app on my phone, which is handy sometimes if I'm struggling to see certain colours. But also you can just simply use a swatch of your coloured pencils and just put that against the reference photograph, and you should be able to pick out pretty much most of the colours that you need. Now, the secret to getting good fur, in my opinion, is lots of light layering using a basic fur technique, which is used in the majority of furs, with the exception of really curly or wavy long fur. There are some slight different techniques for them, and using lots of light layers, as I say, with very sharp pointed pencils, and introducing lots of colours in there, and that's with putting some glazes on to actually warm certain areas of the fur up or cool them down. So there's quite a lot to think about, but it's not as daunting as you think. So I'll just move the camera now, and we'll go on to see the work, and I'll go through first of all the pencils that I'm going to be using. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to be doing tonight a brown fur, so it's going to be a standard type of fur. The reference that I'm using is it's one that I had for it's off Pixabay. I have done a couple of brown dogs, but the picture quality, I couldn't get them. When I zoomed into it, it distorted the pixels. So this is a better one. I've just got it off of Pixabay. So it's a free imaging, so there's no copyright. So you can see it's a brown fur. It's got. I picked it because it has got quite a few tonal values in there as well. So it's not just one flat colour. That's the important thing, but to remember. Okay, so the colours. All I've done is I've drawn a circle on here to do the fur lining. You can do it in a square, or you can just do it loose on the paper, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And I'm just going to list the colours down here. So I'm going to work through my colours in sort of the way I use them. So a lot of the time I have some base colours. Now my base colours usually consist of a cream or ivory, and a couple of greys, a warm grey and a cool grey, but the lightest. So it's like a warm grey one and a cool grey one. So these are what I've got here today. I'm not using the ivory. I could do, but I think I'll stick to these colours. I think these are fine. And then I might introduce the ivory just, well, in fact, yeah, I will introduce the ivory just for up here where we've got these lighter tones. So I'm just going to make sure my ivory is nice and sharp. Okay. So we do have the ivory pencil as well. I'm not going to put them down. Well, I'll put them down, but you're not really going to see them. What I normally do is I tend to work on a big sheet. I have my picture sort of framed here that I'm working on, and then on this side of the larger sheet of paper, I list my colours, whether there's, where the warm tones are, and list any notes that I want to help me through the project, so that when I'm actually doing the project, I'm not having to stop and start. Okay, so I've just done a swatch there. So that's the warm grey one, that's the cold grey one, and then another foundation colour or base layer I would use is this ivory, which you're not going to really see on this paper. I'll swatch it down anyway. So that's ivory. The pencils I'm using, by the way, are Polychromos. I sometimes use luminance, and I also use the Caran d'Ache Pablo, and occasionally I've been known to use the Derwent Artist. So I do have quite a range of colour pencils. I've also got the set of the Lightfast. So, and I mix and match them. They're quite fine to mix and match as well. So if you can't find the precise colour in one set that you've got, the likelihood is that you're going to find them in another set. So they're my base colours. Okay, so I'm going to leave them there for now. Two other colours I'm going to mention that I won't probably swatch down, but I always have in my little toolkit here, and that is a white for blending. My preferred method of blending is by a pencil. Very rarely do I use a solvent, but you can use a solvent if you want to. I just prefer not to. You can scratch out as well using a knife, but to be honest, my blending method is used with I use the Caran d'Ache Luminance White. I find that to be one of the most opaque whites. Occasionally I use the Pablo, but I do like the Luminance one. That's another pencil. We don't put it down as a colour because it's not really a colour. Another one that I always have in my toolkit, I don't like to use black as black. I do put black on pictures, but it's usually over or glazed over other layers of colour. And it's just used really essentially to darken something if I want it to be really, really dark. But dark sepia is a nice colour out of the Polychromos range for using for sort of darker areas. So you don't necessarily go in too dark straight away and produce a flat colour. You want something with a bit of texture and a bit of depth. So I always have that in my kit. So they'll stay up there. So now we're going to come to the colours that we're actually going to use in the fur. So I've picked out some colours here. So one of the colours I've got here is a Bista, again out of the Polychromos range. And as you can see, I'm putting them fairly, I've got the picture at the side here, so you can see they do match up with quite a few of the colours there. So that's one of the brown tones. So that's the Bista. And the reason I write these down at the side of the work that I'm doing is I do sort of work as a worksheet to start with. So I set out my sketch, do a rough colouring of it with the colours that I've got on my list down here, so that then when I come to do the actual picture or I want to reproduce it for a workshop, I've got all the information on this one sheet of paper, and then I can just break it down ready, so I'm not messing about when I'm actually doing the full picture. Okay, so we've got the Bista. The next one that I've had a look at, and that sort of corresponds to some of these duller brown tones, and this is a Nougat. Okay, it's got a slightly redder tone to it, but it's not far off the Bista. So that's the Nougat, or Nugget. Okay, then we're going to move on, and I've got here, which is one of my favourite colours, is a burnt sienna. So this is definitely a reddy brown. And this I will put in where the warmer areas are, and also where we can see some of the reddish brown. So like here, it matches up quite nice with some of these colours here. So I've got the burnt sienna. Okay. Then I've got a darker brown for these darker areas here, and this is a walnut brown. So this is more sort of a sort of what you used to natural dark brown if you haven't got walnut brown or Polychromos. Okay, that's that one. And then for anything that we've got sometimes on brown fur, you get where the light hits it in certain areas, you can get sort of, and I'm just going to put a little bit on there so you can actually see slight sections of it. And this is the Carpet Munton Violet. So again, it's a brown, but it's sort of a violety brown. It's got a violet tinge to it, a violet tinge. So this is really good for putting in the shadows. Okay, so that's the Carpet Munton Violet. Okay. And then the final three pencils that I've got here, we've got a terracotta, a purpley blue. I've picked out what we've got this time. This is the mauve, but you could use Delft blue, anything like that. And then I've got some manganese violet, so it's a violety colour. So these three colours I use basically as glazes. So if we swatch these down, so that's a terracotta. And that would go anywhere where we've got any sort of warm tones. So sometimes around this area here, it's got an orangey tinge to it, so we could glaze at the end with that or in between. Then where we've got any cooler areas, we've got the mauve or delft blue. Okay, so that would produce on top of other colours a cooler tone to it overall. We're only going to very lightly glaze those colours over. We're not going to be using them as sort of strict colours. And then we've got this one here, the manganese violet. Now that works well with browns, oranges, anything like that. So if you're doing ginger fir or anything like that, this is really good for doing shadow work. Okay, so that is the manganese violet. Now, as I say, other brands might have colours very similar to these, but just called different names. So, you know, you don't have to stick to these colours. Just look at your reference photograph. That's the most important thing. And get the colours as near to that match as you can. I mean, I use an Apple iPad, and I can zoom in and I can see my colours fairly well. So I use my swatch of my coloured pencils that I have, and then it's finding it. It's easier to find. So for every set of coloured pencils that I have these swatch cards, and I keep them together with each of the sets. So it's done like that so that I can hold it against. So if I go to sort of the browns and the neutral colours, the back here, I can move this along and up and around all of this picture here, and I can find out pretty much, you know, what colours I would be using in there. As I say, you can use apps, you can use computer programs to help you. Whatever you feel comfortable, that's the way you should go with it. Okay, so I'll pick this. This is a Pixabay free image. So we're going to put a base layer down, and I'm going to go through the techniques of basic fur. Now, one of the essential items you're going to need is this is a soft makeup brush, really, but a broom, a sweep broom, just to sweep away all the bits of dust that your colour pencil will produce. Okay, it's not always obvious to you on the paper, but every sort of couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, I would give it a sweep so that you clear the dust so that it doesn't muddy any of your colours. Okay, so I recommend one of them. I've got a rubber eraser, which obviously is not cleaning at the moment, so the battery one. So what I would do is make sure the edges are clean. Sometimes what I do is if I've gone over and I need to sort of get some more of this light area in, you can use an eraser for that, something that's small like. You can use something like this, or you could use one of these, which is a Tombow eraser. So it's sort of got a little rubber end in there, and you can get refills for these as well. So they're a handy tool to have for really more precise markings. Okay, and then a couple of my other main rubbers is a putty rubber, soft rubber, and that's good for when you've got your drawing in, just to ease off on the graphite layer so it doesn't get in with your coloured pencil and muddy it. Right then, so to start with, the main thing we're going to do is we'll pick the colours. So now we're going to look, I'm going to keep the reference photo pretty close to me so I can see. I'm taking note of which direction the fur is going in. So it's basically from this side, it's coming out here, it's coming up like that, and coming up there, and then it sort of comes out in this direction on this side, comes up the middle, there, and then it works its way round. This is actually the place on an animal where this has come from. Is if you could just see here, where it's really dark, that'll be the top of the dog's eye. So basically, we're sort of following that line direction. Okay, so normally what I would do is on my drawing, I would put some very light, where there were significant changes, I would put, or like a darker area, I would actually line it by putting just a couple of very light directional strokes in, and if it changes direction in an area, just as a guide, so that when I'm doing the the portrait, I know where I'm going with the fur. Okay. Right then, so I'm going to start off. So the basic technique now for doing fur, or one that I use anyway, I give a couple of coats first. I work in small areas. So what I tend to do with the portrait is I do the eyes first and the nose. So they're the three major key points. And then what I do is I work outwards from the eyes using the fur technique. Now this is a standard fur. You can, it's sort of like short. You've just got to keep looking at your reference for. It's a little bit longer type fur there and there, but it's in generally this is a short fur. Okay, so it's a standard fur. That's the one I'm going to be showing you to start with, using brown tones. So the first thing we've got to do is get a couple of base layers down to give us some adhesion for the paper, so it gives a nice coating on the tooth of the paper, to give somewhere for the colour to grip onto. So my first thing is I'm going to do is I'm going to work with, actually I'm going to put in the cream. So I've got the ivory. So I've got my ivory, I've got it in a pencil extender because obviously it's getting a bit short. So the first thing, one of the techniques when you're doing fur is we need to put a couple of layers of base layers of shading. So to shade, so that you don't get a lot of pressure, we need really light pressure on the subject to start with. You need to hold your pencil sort of quite far back like this. So if I show you with a full pencil, if you hold it sort of far back, and just put the pencil tip and lightly, so like that, and just lightly backwards and forwards in a shading motion, you will get a nice light, even coverage of colour like that. And it is very light, you can hardly see it on there. And then if you need to, you can put another layer on and do it as cross hatching or whatever your subject sort of needs you to do. The other way you could do it is if we're doing sort of skin or things like, or the eye or something like that, we tend to use small, again, just with the point rested, so you're not putting any pressure through the pencil, just small circular motions like that, and you'll get a nice even coverage again. But for the base, for the fur, what I tend to do is do this shading motion very lightly. So by holding the pencil to the back, it stops you from putting too much pressure through the point of the pencil. If you hold your pencil there, no matter how hard you trying to do a light layer, what 9 times out of 10 what you end up with is you end up with it's not very even and it's quite streaky piece there at the top. So that's a bit streaky, that's a lot more smooth. So by holding the pencil further back, you can't put as much pressure through. You just let your point touch the paper and then literally gently backwards and forwards using the side of the pencil, stopping and turning the pencil like that. What that does, it keeps your point sharp for longer and evenly pointed all the way around. Whereas if you just stick to doing it like that on the side, this will wear out first. So if you can, just keep turning your pencil nib like that. Okay, so that's the first piece of the technique. So I'm going to use cream. Now I'm doing the shading motion, but I am trying to do it in the same direction as the fur. So I'm doing mine in a circle. You could do it in a square. So I'm going to start here, and I'm just doing it very lightly backwards and forwards. You're hardly going to see this because it's hardly any different to the paper. Okay, so I'm coming up here, and then this side, starting to come around this side. So this is just the base layer. As long as you're going in the general direction, you get a nice layer of colour down, smooth, light, and then this side sort of comes round. You can move your paper around, whichever is more comfortable for you, and then obviously I'm trying to keep it on the screen. So, but it's coming round here, so I'm just going to shape all of this round. Nice gentle shading motion, and then it comes back round this way here. And then it's coming down more or less straight down this end of my shape. Okay. Keep looking at your reference photograph. That's the important thing, because you want to be doing what you actually see and not what you think you can see. Okay, so that's one layer. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to my warm grey one. I'm going to go back over using the same motion, very light, loosely held pencil, moving the nib around, following the line of the fur. And that's that side slightly. So it's coming up here and then it's coming round and out that way. I've got the general direction of the fur. Okay, so then it's coming up. It starts to level up at this point here, the end. And then it's coming round. Okay, back down here, and then this is coming sort of really around here. Shading all the time, very light pressure. Touch it round. And there we've got our second. So you're not really going to see a lot on the paper initially, but there is. You'll see it yourself. You won't see it through this camera very well, but I've got a couple of layers of my base coats on there so that I can see I've sort of filled most of the tooth of the paper with very light motions and light pressure through the pencil, because obviously we've got a lot more layers to go. So that's the base coat, and that is the first part of doing fur technique. So it's a shading motion because we're not wanting the detailing just yet, and we're just trying to create a base for the rest of the colours to work from. Okay, so your base layer you will suss out from the lightest. If you look at the lightest colours that you've got in the whole of the fur area, and decide from there what you're going to use for your base coats. Okay, so we've got the base layers down. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go over gently again with the white. Again, doing exactly the same thing, going in the same direction as the fur. And all I'm doing is I'm just lightly blending those two base colours together. So light pressure. And this will, you won't see a lot, but it will blend those two colours in nicely and give it a bit of a smoother base ready for the other colours to adhere to. Okay, so that's that bit. All white on one side. So now I'm going to start building my colours up. Now with coloured pencil, it's a little bit like you do with watercolours. You need to really work light to dark. Now, when I do start a portrait, if I'm doing the eyes especially, I do map in my darker areas, but I only map them in lightly with the darker colours. And then when I'm doing the fur, I always work from light to dark. Right, so that's a must. So we've got this base coats down and the cream. So we've got most of this lighter area is there. So what you've got to imagine, it's like stripping this picture down and working negatively. So we've got the lighter area. So now we're going to build up these other areas. So we're going to start with, I'm going to start with the Vista, that one. So I'm going to start, so you can put this, you can even put this in the really dark areas, because what will happen is, the more we build the colours up, the darker this area will get, and it will look quite as it should do. So we've got a darker area here and a darker area here, and then we're coming up darker here as well. And we've got sort of mid-tones here and some lighter areas here. Right then, so to start with, when you're doing this is where we had the first strokes. So where I showed you earlier where we do the light shading motion, so you've got that down as your base coats. Okay, so you can put a couple of layers of that down just to create your base. And then you come in with your other pencils, very sharp tip. Now, when you're drawing fur lines, the the thing you've got to be careful about is don't go in holding the pencil really down there to start with and go and do that. Because all you're doing is creating, the lines are a bit too thick, they're a bit too uniform. So there's the same thickness at each end. Now, fur and hair, that you get fur that crosses over each other. So if you look at this, you've got, it's all going in that direction, general direction, but you've got some that cross over. And this is what you've got to create to make it look natural. So the best way of doing that is, again, holding your pencil, you can hold it a little bit nearer to the nib point, but I would still hold mine at, I tend to still hold mine halfway. I put my point on and I sort of lift my pencil a little bit higher up off the paper this time, so it's not as flat. Okay, I put the nib on there. I'm not putting a lot of pressure through it at all. And all I do is, it's like a flicking motion. Like that. Keep turning my nib. Okay, so do that. Keep moving it. So you'll get quite a few of the hairs that cross over each other. So by doing it, I'll show you this white bit. So nib on, lift up, push and lift off. So what happens is, as it lifts off, you've got this finer finish on the end there. Okay, so you've not got this like really rigid looking line. Like that, and just keep. So I'm going in that general direction there, but you can see that the first strokes are actually, I mean, you'll be slower to start with, so if you just take your time, and you'll see that the first strokes actually overlap each other like that. So you do get a lot better pencil marks, whereas they look too rigid, you know, they're too thick. This looks a lot more natural. So then the other thing you've just got to consider is, like I've said, we've got sort of dark, you can see if you squint at the photo, you'll get darker sections and lighter sections. So if you're doing a darker section, so if I do a bit more work here, so like that, okay? But say we've got a really dark patch here, all you do is you go back in, you're not increasing the strength or the pressure anymore. All I'm doing is I'm actually putting pencil strokes, keep twisting the pencil, I'm putting the pencil strokes closer together over it a couple of times, make sure that the pencil strokes are closer together when I want it to be darker. And then as I come away to this lighter area, I still put a few in, but I don't put as many in, and I move away so that you've got a smooth transition from the really dark area of fur into the lighter section of fur. Okay, so when you look at it, you'll have so really close up piece of fur there, gives you the darker area, and then you just sort of ease the pressure off a little bit and put less strokes in the lighter area, and then you'll get that when you look at it, you get a gradual transition from the light, from the dark to the light. So that's the actual fur technique that we're going to be using now. So we've got the base layer on, done by shading. So now we're going to go in round. So the first one I'm going to use is this Beaster. Okay. So we've used these for the base layers. So now I'm looking at these points here. So I'm going to start by going in here. So I'm just picking it up. I keep constantly checking the reference of which direction I'm going. Now these are quite dark, so I'm just going to put the fur strokes closer together. And as I come up, I'm just going to ease off with the pressure a little bit and put less on. Start to turn them round. So this is a lighter section. So I'm just doing it quite light here. Okay. So you could cover the whole of the area. Right, following the direction of fur. Do fairly light strokes. So the rest of it, I'm just going to do the same light colour all over. I've done that because I know I've now got a start point. I know where I'm starting from when I come back to add other layers and darken up. So to start with, I'm just going to do a full layer of light pressured, just generally going across, especially in the general direction, using the Beaster first. Okay. Comes around there. You can also turn it and put your point on that way and pull the first strokes that way as well. So you've got, that gives you even more natural looking fur. So some of them put the point on and just push and pull and lift up so it's off the paper. Okay, and then I'm just gently coming around again, following the direction of fur. So it's quite light at these ends here, so I'm not going to put too much pressure on there, just very light like that. Coming around. So when you get round to here, it's almost horizontal at the ends. Okay, like I say, holding the pencil far back, just putting gentle, put the nib on, just lift and lift the pressure off there, and then it starts to come down as we come round here. Okay, so it's coming round. That's your basic fur, so just keep doing that, filling the circle or square, whichever you're using. Constantly checking that you're going in the right direction. Don't make them too small or too large. Full way down. There you go. So that's my first layer of fur strokes. They're very, very, you can see how light they are. They're very light, but they are all going in the right directions of the fur. Okay, this is my starting point. So I know that's going to be that point there. Okay. So I'm going to put that to one side for now. So then I'm going to go with the next colour, which I'm going to use is going to be the nuggets. Which one's that one? The nugget. Okay, so now I'm going to use this nugget. So by looking at my nugget, if you just look roughly where you can see, so that's sort of around this area here. We can put it in these darker areas. So around this bit here, and you've got some of it here. Okay, if you're struggling with your tones and colours, what you could do is, alongside of this, if you have a black and white photograph of this, it gives you the tonal values where the tones are. But also, if you squint at your photograph, you will also be able to pick out the tones there. So I'm just going to now sort of going over where we've just been, mainly with this nugget. Okay. Now, in some of the areas where I can see this sort of really browny colour that corresponds to this, I'll probably put a few more extra fur lines closer together. And then where the light area is, I'll sort of pull back and not put as many, pull less pressure and not as many fur strokes. So coming up here, we've got quite a bit of this colour here. Okay. It comes up. Okay, and then over this darker area here, and it comes around here. Okay. Come around here, and that colour around here. significant amount of it. Okay. So I'm not going to put as much here. This is quite a lot of a lighter area. So if you can see, I'm sort of going to come. So we've already got quite a light colour there now anyway. So I'm now going to start pulling back from there. So when I'm coming out now, I'm not going to come quite out to the end. Again, still doing it loose, the fur. Okay, and then come round, follow the line and direction that the fur is going in. Okay. Comes around here. Up this side. And keep turning your point of your pencil. This is coming into that darker area here, so you can actually put a few extra fur lines closer together there, because that's getting darker. We'll be coming off the paper there. Okay. And it's getting lighter there, so we're not going to put as many fur lines there, just to leave that a little bit light come off. A bit more closer together here. We've got another light patch there. Okay. Okay, so that's now with another colour on top. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get my white again. Again, keeping the work quite light. With the dust. Okay, keeping everything still light. And now I'm just going to gently, so again, I'm holding the pencil back. And the point is not quite as pointed up, but I do need a nice sharp point. And what I'm doing now is I'm just doing some shading like we did initially, just with the white, just gently blending. So what happens is it doesn't destroy the fur lines, but it now blends some of the pigment in to make it look a bit softer, which fur's got to have that softness look as well. Okay. I'm just going to turn this around a bit easier for me. Okay, so also that blends the sort of mid-tones into that lighter area up at the top. And all it's doing is smoothing some of this paper down again so we can put more layers on. Okay, and with the white. Okay, so we did 2 layers for the base coats. Then we put on the white, we blended with the white, so that's a blend. And then we did the bistre, the nougat, and then we've done the white again, blend. So up to now we've done 6 layers. Okay, and it's still light. So now we're going to start building up this the colours now. So we've done the 2 lighter browns. So now I'm going to go in with this. I'm going to go in with the burnt sienna. So if you look here, you've got some sort of reddy browns. So this is where we're going to sort of concentrate that and in these darker areas. So I'm holding the pencil not right in the middle, but it's quite a short pencil, so I'm being very careful with this. So right, I'm starting now to accentuate these the darker areas. So put the point down, push and pull up, so just creating the darker tones, and then when you're coming out of the darker tones into the mid tones, just release the pressure a little bit. Still put a few strokes there, because you don't want it just to end. Okay, so it's going into that lighter patch there. Okay, and then as I'm coming round here, I've got a bit more pressure again, so I can just literally put the marks a little bit closer together and a little bit more pressure. Following the direction of form, turning your pencil, keep going. And that comes around, and then as you come into the lighter area, just take the pressure off and do less, put your strokes further apart, not as close together. Okay. So this is quite a mid-tone lighter area. Okay, then this comes darker again here. So we can do the closer together, more pressure. And just release the pressure off and put less strokes in as you're going into the lighter part. And then closer together. This is the darker area here. Okay. Again, just pull back the pressure, don't put as much pressure on, but still put a few of those strokes through there. Okay. And then back to this section here. So I've done that bit there, which is there. So now I'm looking at this section here. So we've got quite a bit here where we can put quite a few. Keep following the right direction though, so it's coming that way around. Put them closer together. These are quite reddy brown, so this is the right colour for this section. Okay. Now down here it gets really dark, so I'm just gonna. Okay. I'm trying to map the areas in to start with like that. Okay, so it comes around there. So it's point, push, lift. And you get much more, by holding your pencil further back, you get a much more natural fur stroke, and you get some fur lines that cross over, which is exactly what we're looking for. And then we've got a little bit of colour fibber. It's not quite as dark as that, but we've got to build this up yet. So put some of this colour in here. That sort of comes off the page there a little bit, so it's a bit darker up there. Then we get this light patch here, so as we come round, got a bit of colour in. Okay. So you can already see the lighter areas and the darker areas already starting to form. Okay, and that's purely by, we've layered up the different browns, but we've eased off on pressure around the lighter areas, and then we put in the odd bit of fur line, but not totally. And then in the darker areas, all you're doing is you're putting the fur lines there and you're putting them closer together with the colours that you're using. And that is how you build up these areas. So that's the burnt sienna. So we will be coming back to that again, probably. So that's another layer. I'm just ticking here so we can see roughly how many layers. You'd be surprised how many layers you can get on here. Right then, so now I'm going to go in with the walnut brown. So I'm going to really start to darken these two areas especially. These are the, if you squint at the photographs, they're the darkest, and then there's a little section there. Okay, so I'm now holding the pencil a little bit more towards the nib. Same procedure, I'm holding the pencil further up though now, so you put the point on, push, lift. Just sort of, this is only pushing the pencil away from you, go away sort of thing, and you just push it. Just be careful you don't do too big a stroke. Okay. So now you can see that colour is really now starting to darken up. And then I'm just going to start on this side. So quite close together, the fur lines, where the darkest parts are. And where it's really dark, sort of here, where it's just above the eye. Okay, you can actually put a little bit of shading over your pencils, over your first strokes there, just to sort of, because that is dark, you're not going to see any of the sort of lighter fur coming through there. So just glazing over a little bit with the darker brown there, just to fill in some of those areas. And we're going to continue. So as it comes out, it starts, it's not quite as intense as it comes out. So you've got some of these other colours showing through. So that red that we put on before, you've got all of those colours coming through in these patches. And this is what works. And this is what gives you the depth and the texture of the fur. Okay, now this is the lighter area, but we do need some colour in there. I'm just releasing the pressure off a little bit here, lifting it where I'm just putting in some odd strokes where it's a bit lighter. Okay, and then come back into this other darker area. So again, now keep twisting the pencil and I'm putting the strokes closer together. Okay, let me go off the paper there. And then when you get to the edges, if you want, you can do it in the opposite direction. So put your pen on and pull it toward you, just to soften some of those edges in a little bit more. Okay. Now we're coming up here. So these aren't quite as dark, so just make sure you've not got the same pressure on your pencil as you have down here. It needs to be that little bit lighter pressure. Okay, put your fur lines closer together, so we can build up the, you know, the texture on this side. Okay. So when you've got this bit down, you should see where you've got this really dark, much darker area, sort of going into it's still a darkish area, but it's not as dark because you've pulled off with the first strokes. You've not done them quite as close together. Okay. So you're not going necessarily everywhere with this pencil. You're just going where you can see the darker patches of the fur. And then in these lighter areas here, all we're going to do is put in little less pressure, but just put in a couple of bits of that colouring, because you will see flecks of the colour, only little flecks. So just be careful about how much. You don't want to overdo it. You need something in there so you've got this continuity and it's a lot smoother. Okay, so that's the walnut brown. So that's the darkest brown. So that's another layer. Okay, so if you look at it now, you can see it's now starting to build up nicely. Okay, and it is looking textured and it is looking sort of deep in colour, not just flat colour across the paper. So I'm now just going to go over with the white. So what this will do as well, I'm blending with the white. So I don't know if you can see, I'll just do it in this bottom corner for now. So I'm just lightly putting the pressure on and doing a shading motion and blending some of that colour just so that the first strokes look a bit more blended. Okay, so when you see it, what it does, it puts a bit of a sheen on and it lightens the colour and it changes the tone slightly, but it has softened it a little bit to what it is up here. And this is why we do keep blending in between, but you don't want to put a lot of pressure on. All you're doing is actually blending the pigment together without losing the fur, without destroying your paper tooth on the paper. Okay, so I'm just now literally shading over or blending all of this area in with the white. Okay, so it's changed the tone of it a little bit and it's subdued it, knocked it back, whatever you want to call it, so it's nice and again it's just blended the whole of that tooth of the paper out so it's nice and smooth. Okay, so now you can see you're starting to get this fur line, the fur, so we need to just now really ramp it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do first, I'm actually going to get my cream pencil that we used on the base coat. And I'm actually just going to put a glaze over on the lighter areas. So I'm just glazing sort of these external lighter layers and these couple of layers here in the middle. So again, just a light motion. And a bit of cream on. Now you might not think that makes a lot of difference, but it actually does, and it will make difference to the finished amount because these colours will come through each other. So I've put that on there. So that's another layer that we've had with a cutting pencil. Okay. So we've blended again, and then we've put on the glaze. Okay. Right then, so now I'm just going to go back over with a couple of these pencils to get these darker areas really sort of saturated a bit more. And then what we're going to do, we're going to glaze with some of these colours here. We may use a little bit of this dark sepia, and then we should be at a point where it's starting to look a lot thicker and like that. So it's basically patience, building the layers up and getting the colour and tonal changes to fit in with these. So I'm just going to go back over now with the Bistre. So you will now start to see some colour changes, and you'll also start to see it getting a lot thicker and a lot looking more like fur. So again, it's the same principle, sharp pencil, make sure your pencils are kept sharp, and turning your point round, and then just put this colour wherever you think you can see it on this picture. It does appear in a lot of this area here, and like I say, in the light, really lighter areas, you can start to put a little bit of it in, but don't oversaturate it. Okay. So put a little bit more here because this is a bit too light. So that's it. I'm going to put this in close together here. And then pull off the pressure just a little bit. And round here, following the direction. Keep turning my pencil. I'm just going to sharpen it. Get your pencils either because you can break the rope. I'm just going to sharpen it a little bit. Okay. Put the point on the paper. Lift or push and just create those nice soft lines in different directions. The general direction of your fur. And I'm just putting the odd few little bits in the lighter area because otherwise these will become too light and they won't fit in with this. So I'm just going to put a couple in there. So we've still got this light patch, but it's blending in nicely to the darker area. You can see where it's starting to change slightly. Okay. So I've got this light patch here, or mid, I call it mid-tone. So I'm just going to put a couple in, but they're not as close together. And back into the thicker area, so it's closer together. Like that. Coming around. I'm going to darken this bit here, and put a bit of shading in here so it looks looks like it's much better. Release the pressure and pull a few bits back in. Like that. Okay. Okay, so now you can see how it is really now starting to build up. So I'm just going back now through these colours again. So I've got just now I'm going to put in, but these are more or less going where the darker areas are, and then just lightly pulling out. So we're really trying to just darken this area up here. So I'm not going to go everywhere with this one because this is a brown and we've got sort of reddy browns here, so I want to start to accentuate that. So I'm just literally putting where it's really dark here at the bottom, and then all I'm doing is lifting the pressure. I'm just going to put a couple of strokes around here and there and the rest of the fur there. Okay, it's all ready fur, and then as we come back round here, we've got this sort of colour again. Okay, so I'm just going to put more of that colour in there and in this real dark area. So fur lines are closer together. That. I've got some reddy brown here, but it's also got quite a few of these. I'm just going to put in a couple of the, see my pencil's getting a bit, when you start to get your pencils a bit blunt, you end up getting thicker chunks of hair which you don't want. So I'm just going to, a couple of turns, that's it, now I've got my point back. Okay. And just for these light areas, I'm just going to put in a couple of loose bits of this colour, not too much. Okay. And then I'm going to go in with this reddy brown. So this reddy brown, I'm really going to concentrate on these areas here where we can see. So this bit here particularly is dark, but it's also quite reddy in colour. Okay, so make sure I pull it out gently, it blends. Okay. And then this sort of clump that's going up here is quite red. Again, quite close together. Keep turning your point. Actually got quite a nice sharp point as you're sort of coming round. There's a little bit of hint of red in there. Not as dense as there, so you don't put the fur lines as close together. You just sort of space them out a little bit more. Okay. And this bit here coming back into this really dark section is sort of ready, so I'm adding a few bits of this burnt sienna there. So you will see it starting to change because we put the other brown here. This is brown here, this has got a little bit more of a red tone on it. Okay. It comes down here, a bit of a red tone coming up there. The lines closer together there. Okay. That. So now we've got some more reddy tones in there. So I'm just going to give it another blend. We're near the end now. Okay. So I'm just blending it all nicely together now with the white again. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the dark sepia that I put down, or browny grey or dark grey. It's not exactly black, it's quite dark, it's not black. So I'm just going to put in some few bits of fertilizer where it's really dark, and then lift the pressure off. So sort of round here. And then I'm just going to, because this point's quite sharp, I'm just going to literally put in a few little so where it's really get these little really dark pieces, all I'm doing is putting little bits of this colour in. So you do have bits of sort of like a really dark, and this is darker than the dark brown, so it does stand out a little bit. So right down here where it's really dark, and then start to pull it out a little bit here. And then we've got some darker bits coming through here. We've got the odd, very light pressure bits coming through all this lighter area. So you're basically going over the whole thing with this really dark browny black, or black if you've got, if that's the only one you've got. But just be careful with the black. You don't want to sort of put too much pressure down there. So this then is giving you all these really dark bits, even in the light areas. You're starting now to pull all of these colours together, and even in the light areas you've got these little dark flecks. So this is what this colour is trying to replicate. So again, just very loose, and only put them really close together when you come into an actual really dark area. That there's a bit. And then get some quite darkish bits here that we can pull away. Again, just keep following the direction of the fur, keep the point sharp. Okay, so we now have a point where we've more or less got all our colours on. Okay, so I'm now going to just give it one more last blend of the white, and then I'm going to put some glazes over the top. So glazes are where we now look at the sort of fur and the coat of the animal that we've got, and we pick out sort of temperature tones. Okay, so I'm looking at this now, and if you look, it's got sort of, depending on how you hold it in the light, it's actually got some sort of yellowy orangey tones here. Now, you could use the terracotta, which I had put down. I'm now looking, oh, I don't know, yeah. So in those areas there, all you're doing is, it's similar to when you're blending, you put you don't want to actually see the colour down as such. What you're doing is just having a hint of that colour. So basically, I am just, in that area, I am just very lightly doing a shading motion. I'm actually going into the lighter area as well. And then I'm just lightly putting this sort of where I see the warmer tones. So reddy oranges and tones like that are sort of warmish. So I'm just glazing that colour over so you don't actually see too much of that colour. It just enhances the colours of the browns. So all the reddy browns will look redder, okay? And then we've got that tone coming on up here as well. So again, just a nice light glaze. But then down here, we've also got some shadow, sort of duller. So what I'm going to use for that is I'm going to use this mauvey colour. So right over the darker areas, I'm just glazing again. Again, like I said, I don't want to particularly see the colour, I just want a hint, because I'm just adjusting the temperature of the picture or the fur. Okay, so it's coming in there. And then this bit here is a bit, sort of got a bit of shadow to it. And even the light area there has got shadow. So again, just very lightly introducing this mauve. So that's now created a shadow down this area here, and there's a little bit of it here. Got a little bit of shadow here. Okay. And then basically that's your fur. I mean, mine's not quite as dark as the picture. I could have done a few more layers if I wanted. I mean, in total there, you've actually done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. There's 15 layers there of colour. But you can see how it has created varying brown tones. You see, it's really dark here. I mean, it looks darker to me than you're seeing on the screen. As I say, you can keep going. I'll probably just glaze over some of these browns a little bit more, just to give them a bit more intensity and colour. Like that. That's all I'm doing at the end, is I'm just glazing. I'm putting very little pigment down, but just enough so that it can vary the colour slightly. I'm just going to put in a little bit more of this sleepy where this dark bit is in the middle, the reddy brown. You can probably see that, but you can still see the first strokes. That's the idea of it, because we've been blending every couple of layers. You still get to see the first strokes, but they're a lot softer, that's all. But can you see you have got the first strokes there, but they're a lot softer. Okay? And you've got your light patches here and around the outer edges. But you can see how it all gradually goes into this darker area, but you haven't got lines, so it doesn't look too liney. It looks like the first should look. If you just compare it. Okay? So that's brown fur and the standard fur technique. If you've got any questions, you can always email me or phone me, even, and my number's on there. Now, standard fur, that is how we do all standard fur. The main points, as I say, I'll just go over them, are it's sharp point on your pencil. Okay. Always keep checking that you go in the right direction. Okay, so you check which direction your fur is going in. Okay, and also keep an eye on I mean, like here, it's getting quite short here, and it's a bit longer there, even though it's a standard fur. So look at the length of the fur lines. And also then, you know, your colours, also don't forget you need to layer, lots of layers in light pressure. Okay, and then the fifth point is where you're getting darker. So to show the darker sections of the fur, whatever colour you're using, you put your fur lines closer together with a little extra pressure, not much, so a bit more pressure. And then as you're coming out into these lighter areas, you lift the pressure and just put a bit further apart than what they would be here. Okay, so they're the 6 main points to remember. Now, when it comes to base coats, like I've said before, it's up to each individual what they use for their base coats. It depends. I always change them depending on what animal, or if I'm doing, you know, a portrait of a human being, whatever. I do have sort of set colours that I do use for different types of animals, etc. So this is, I hope this is helpful to you if you're doing animals or fur, feathers, anything like that. This is the basic technique that you need to get to grips with. Okay, and you can layer, I mean, I could keep layering that and layering it until I got it to look, but you don't want to kill the colour completely until it's all shiny. You do need to see these fur lines. But as I say, that's quite a lot of layers on there, and it does look textured. It doesn't look a flat colour. You've got depth in there, and that's everything that you need for what we call realism, and a 3D effect. So I'm hoping that's been of use to you, and you've enjoyed it. If you have, come back. I am going to be doing a good few more. I've got a few more to do, like, let's have a look. We've got, there's white fur, now wavy fur. I'll just show you that one. Let me go back to there. So wavy fur is slightly different. So you've got that one and the colour. So I'm doing a separate tutorial on that. Ginger fur. Now, quite a few people are nervous about doing ginger hair. Now, I have just done my own cat. If I can show you on here, if you can get to see, okay. So let's have a look. Well, this is our whiskey here, okay, and he's ginger and white. So it's using the basic fur technique. It's just the colours to produce ginger. I've used more oranges and yellows. And you don't want the really bright colours, but you also use quite a bit of the reddy browns as well in this, and some flesh colours. But I will be doing a video on the ginger fur. Now then, black fur. Black fur again it's the standard way of doing the fur lines. It's about the colour. Now, black fur, you know, the biggest mistake a lot of people do when they first start doing colour pencils is they just put a layer of black on there. Now, there are a lot of colours in whichever fur you do, because what happens is with animals, the light hitting the fur actually reflects a lot of the surrounding colours as well. So you might see colours in there that you don't think you would see, like light blues, dark blues, even some greens if they're outside. You could get some reflections of greens in there, flesh colours. There's all sorts of colours you will get. So with black fur, to give it that depth and texture, you must get the colours right. And you can see this has got sort of like a cool, so it's a cool black fur. So it's actually got a glaze on there of Delft blue, which gives it that cool effect. Then another fur I'll be doing is what we call brindle fur on a dog. This is mainly for like Staffordshire Terriers, Great Danes. It's they call it like the tiger fur. It's where you've got a light base, and then you've got these flecks of other colours coming in, and it does produce sort of stripy effects or clumps of really dark other dark colours. I'm going to be doing things for like cats, so we're going to be doing the tabby type of fur, grey fur, really curly fur that you would get on like a poodle or a cockapoo. We're doing something like that as well. That comes down to shadows, the light and dark of the curls. So there are quite a lot to go through, and I will be doing short videos for them all that will be available on here shortly. So if you subscribe, you can watch them as many times as you want, stop them, start them, and just enjoy them. And I hope that you will learn from them. That's the whole purpose of it. So that's the first. And then I will also be doing subjects like eyes. So we'll be doing some human eyes and different animal eyes, how to get them to look glassy. Noses, again, different animals' noses, birds' feet, legs, claws, all sorts of things, and feathers. So I will be adding quite a few tutorials a month onto this, onto the TV channel of my website, and I just hope that you enjoy them and you learn something from them. Any questions you need to ask, just email me or phone me or text me, and I'll be happy to answer you. Okay, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and see you again shortly. Bye.